NASA found something huge moving behind the sun and nobody saw it coming. If you click this video, you're about to see what was really found, why it shocked scientists, and how one strange discovery started a wave of big questions. Before we jump in, tell me your country in the comments using just one word. It's always fun to see how far these videos travel. Now let's go back to the moment everything changed, because this story didn't begin with a giant object. It started with one small clue that almost everyone missed. That tiny clue almost everyone missed came from a routine scan of the sun. No alarm sounded, no warning flashed. One quiet image simply looked wrong. At first, NASA engineers thought the strange shape was a camera glitch. Dust sometimes creates odd marks. Heat can bend light. Software can make mistakes. Everything pointed toward a simple error. Then another satellite saw the same dark outline. It wasn't in the same place. It had moved. Slowly, steadily. Nobody expected that. The object stayed hidden because the sun blocked direct views. Every time scientists tried another angle, bright light swallowed the signal. Days passed. Fresh pictures arrived. Each one showed the shape again. Every image placed it a little farther along. That meant one thing. Whatever floated there wasn't standing still. The team checked every system again. They tested every sensor. They compared old records with new ones. Nothing explained the movement. One scientist whispered, "What if this isn't natural?" The room fell silent. Nobody laughed. Nobody answered. They only stared at the screen. Hours later, another scan arrived. This time the outline looked larger. Not by much, but enough to notice. That tiny change made everyone's heartbeat rise. Think about that for a second. Something hidden behind the sun wasn't fading away. It was getting closer. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody knew what it wanted. Still, every new picture showed the same impossible path. Here's where things became even stranger. The object suddenly stopped moving. Then it turned without slowing down. No rock could do that. No comet could either. Every rule the team trusted started falling apart. They needed one final check before telling anyone. If the next scan matched the last, this couldn't stay secret anymore. When the countdown reached 0, every eye fixed on the screen, waiting for the answer that could change everything forever. What appeared next erased every hope that this was a simple mistake. A faint line stretched away from the object like a shadow, yet shadows cannot exist in open space without something blocking light. The line grew longer with every fresh image. Computer models failed again and again. Nothing matched. Someone suggested a broken sensor. Another blamed hidden space dust. A third guessed a rare solar effect. Every idea sounded possible for a moment, then fell apart after another test. The mission leader finally spoke. "Forget what we expect. Follow only the evidence." Everyone nodded. That single sentence changed the mood inside the control room. Fear stepped aside. Curiosity took its place. New measurements arrived before sunrise. The object had changed direction once more. It wasn't drifting. It seemed to be choosing where to go. That thought chilled everyone watching. If movement had a purpose, then this story was far bigger than anyone imagined. Nobody left their chair. Nobody looked away. The next image was already downloading, and every person knew it might reveal the truth or create an even deeper mystery. Waiting for answers nobody expected to hear that day, the control room suddenly filled with a loud alert. A fresh signal had just reached every screen. This time, the object wasn't hiding behind the sun anymore. A small piece of it had moved into view. Nobody spoke. The picture looked blurry at first. Then the image became clear. It wasn't round like a planet. It wasn't rough like an asteroid. Long, flat edges reflected light for only a split second before fading again. That made no sense. Space rocks don't have straight sides. Ice doesn't form sharp corners in open space. Yet every new frame showed the same shape again. Before we go any farther, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy space mysteries like this. We've got many more stories that will make you question what we think we know about the universe. Now, let's see why this discovery became even stranger. The team zoomed in as much as the cameras allowed. Small details started to appear. Tiny bright spots covered one side of the object. At first, they looked like random flashes. A closer study showed something different. The lights followed a pattern. One line turned on. Another line went dark. Then a third line flashed only seconds later. Nothing in nature behaves that way. One engineer thought the camera software had failed again. Another believed sunlight was bouncing from hidden ice. Both ideas sounded possible. Neither survived the next test. The object rotated slowly. Even while turning, the lights stayed locked in the same pattern. They didn't scatter. They didn't flicker without reason. It almost looked like a signal. That single thought changed everything. The room became silent once more. Every person knew what the next question would be, but nobody wanted to ask it first. Could someone have built this? The answer seemed impossible. Humans had never sent anything that large behind the sun. No country had reported a missing spacecraft. Every known mission was tracked from launch until the end. So what was this? Another scan arrived only minutes later. This one showed something even harder to explain. The object wasn't alone. A second shape appeared behind it, then a third. All three moved together with the same speed, the same direction, the same distance between them. That ruled out chance. Three giant objects don't drift across space in perfect formation by accident. A cold feeling spread across the room. Nobody cared about coffee anymore. Nobody looked at the clock. Every eye stayed fixed on the screens. Then the lead scientist noticed one final detail. The three shapes weren't moving around the sun. They were slowly moving away from it, as if they had been hiding there all along. And whatever had kept them hidden was no longer working. Nobody knew why the three giant shapes had stayed hidden for so long. One answer kept coming back. The sun itself had been hiding them. That idea sounded impossible. Then the team tested it anyway. They ran old space images through a new computer model. Instead of looking beside the sun, they searched for tiny changes inside the bright light around it. Most people would never notice those changes. The computer did. Small gaps appeared. Those gaps matched the size of the three objects almost perfectly. The room fell silent again. If the model was right, those shapes had not arrived yesterday. They had been there for years, maybe longer. Every old picture told the same story. The objects stayed close to the sun where nobody could see them clearly. Whenever a telescope pointed that way, the sun's light covered everything. That was the perfect hiding place. Now another question filled the room. Why leave now? Nobody had an answer. The team checked solar storms. Nothing unusual. They checked nearby planets. Nothing had changed. And they checked every known space mission. Nothing came close to the objects. Then one scientist noticed something nobody else had seen. The three shapes were not flying in random directions. They were lining up, one behind another, almost like they were following a path. A map of the solar system appeared on the main screen. The lead scientist placed a line in front of the moving objects and stretched it across space. It crossed the orbit of Mercury, then Venus, then Earth. Nobody breathed. The line did not prove the objects were coming here, but it showed one frightening fact. If they kept moving the same way, Earth would sit directly in their path. The room exploded with questions. Could they change direction again? Were they speeding up? Did they even know Earth existed? Nobody could answer any of it. Fresh data arrived before anyone finished talking. The three objects had become brighter, not because sunlight hit them, because they were glowing on their own. Blue light spread across every edge. Thin lines lit up one after another until each shape looked alive. No natural rock behaves like that. No comet suddenly shines with perfect straight lines. No asteroid turns on like a machine. Every explanation the team trusted had now disappeared. Then something happened that froze every person in the room. One object slowly tilted. A bright beam flashed for less than 1 second. It wasn't aimed at the sun. It wasn't aimed into deep space. It pointed straight toward Earth. The signal lasted only a moment before fading away. Every computer recorded it. Every telescope confirmed it. Nobody could call it a mistake anymore. The mission leader looked around the room and spoke only 6 words. They know someone is watching now. Nobody argued. Nobody smiled. Because the next signal might not be a flash. It might be a message. It might be a message. Or maybe something even worse. Because the next signal didn't come from the strange objects. It came from the other side of the sun. For one long second, nobody inside the control room moved. Every screen showed the same thing. A weak pulse had appeared where nothing should have existed. It was slow, it was steady, and it was getting stronger. That's when everything changed. The team first believed the pulse was a reflection. Bright light from the sun often creates false signals. Those mistakes happen all the time. This wasn't one of them. A second telescope picked up the exact same pulse. Then a third. Now there was no doubt. Something hidden beyond the sun had answered. But answered what? That question spread through the room faster than the data itself. The computers compared both signals. The first beam from the giant object. The second pulse from deep behind the sun. They matched. Not in size, not in brightness, in timing. The gap between both signals was exactly the same every single time. That couldn't happen by chance. Someone whispered the word nobody wanted to hear. Communication. The room fell silent again. If the three objects were sending signals, then something else had to be listening. Every new scan made that idea harder to ignore. The pulse became stronger. Another one followed, then another. Each arrived at the same exact time apart, almost like a heartbeat. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. Scientists searched every known satellite. Nothing matched. They checked deep space probes. Nothing matched. They searched old mission records. Nothing matched. Every answer disappeared. Only one question remained. Who was on the other end? A new computer model finally finished running. It traced every signal backward through space. Everyone expected the path to end near the sun. It didn't. The line kept going. Far beyond Mercury, past Venus, beyond Earth's orbit, past Mars. Then it stopped. Not on a planet, not on an asteroid. It stopped at a place where space should have been completely empty. The lead scientist leaned closer to the screen. Another scan confirmed the result. The empty place wasn't empty anymore. A huge, dark shape slowly appeared. It was much larger than the first three objects. Too large to measure, too dark to reflect sunlight, too still to be natural. Nobody inside the room spoke, because if the first three objects were scouts, then this might be the thing they had been talking to all along. And for the first time since the discovery began, it looked like that enormous shadow had finally started moving. Nobody wanted to believe it. A mistake would have been comforting. A broken sensor would have been even better. But every fresh scan told the same story. The giant shape was leaving its place behind the sun, slowly, carefully, almost like it had been waiting. The control room filled with quiet voices. Nobody shouted anymore. Fear had turned into focus. Every person knew they were watching something no human had ever seen before. Then another surprise appeared. The three smaller objects stopped, not all at once, one after another. The first came to a halt. A few seconds later, the second did the same, then the third. Each one stayed perfectly still, like they were waiting for an order. That didn't look natural. It looked planned. A scientist opened a simulation to predict the next move. The computer tested thousands of possible paths. Most ended the same way. Nothing happened. Then one result stood out. The giant shadow reached the three smaller objects. Every one of them changed direction together at exactly the same moment. The room froze. That wasn't gravity. That wasn't luck. It looked like teamwork. One engineer zoomed in as far as possible. Tiny points of blue light appeared between the large shadow and the three objects. They blinked so fast that most people would never notice them. The computer counted each flash. 21. Always 21. Never 20, never 22. And every exchange followed the same pattern. What if those are instructions? Someone asked. Nobody answered, because nobody had a better idea. Then the light stopped. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. The giant shadow stayed completely dark. The smaller objects didn't move. Even the computers seemed to pause. Then every screen flashed white. The sensor struggled to keep up. Numbers raced across the displays faster than anyone could read them. Energy levels climbed higher and higher. One warning appeared. Then another. Then every alarm inside the control room started ringing. The giant object had released a wave of energy, unlike anything in NASA's records. The wave didn't explode. It spread. Perfectly smooth. Perfectly round. Like ripples moving across a quiet lake. Except this lake was space itself. The wave crossed the 3 smaller objects without slowing down. Nothing happened to them. Then it kept coming. Straight toward Earth. Scientists rushed to calculate the speed. It wasn't moving at the speed of light. It was faster. That should have been impossible. Every law they trusted said nothing could do that. Yet the numbers refused to change. The countdown began automatically. 8 minutes until the wave reached Earth's orbit. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Every eye stayed locked on the timer. 7 minutes, then 6. The room became so quiet that people could hear the cooling fans inside the computers. One scientist whispered something that chilled everyone. What if this isn't an attack? Nobody looked away. Then why send it? Another asked. The answer came before anyone could think of one. A brand new signal appeared inside the wave itself. It wasn't random. It wasn't noise. It repeated the same simple pattern again and again. 3 short flashes, 1 long flash, 3 short flashes. Whatever was coming toward Earth, it wanted someone to notice. Nobody knew if the signal was a warning, a greeting, or something far worse. One thing was clear. It had been sent on purpose. The countdown kept falling. 5 minutes, then 4. Nobody inside the control room looked away from the screens. Every second felt heavier than the last. Then the computers did something strange. Instead of tracking the wave, they started translating it. At first, everyone thought the software had crashed. Random lines filled the monitors. Numbers flashed. Symbols appeared and disappeared. Nothing made sense. Then the pattern changed. Small groups of signals began repeating. Again, and again, and again. That wasn't random. Every language has patterns. Every code has patterns. The system had found one. A language expert was called into the room. She studied the screen for only a few seconds before pointing at one group. That sequence keeps coming back. The computer highlighted it 27 times. The next group appeared 18 times. A third showed up 9 times. The pattern wasn't perfect, but it was close. Close enough to mean something. Then the translation software made its first guess. Nobody expected words. Nobody expected pictures. Instead, it built a map. A glowing line stretched across the screen. It started far beyond Pluto. Then it crossed the solar system. Finally, it stopped. Right at Earth. Nobody spoke. The room felt colder than before. What does it mean? Someone asked. Nobody answered. Because the map wasn't finished. Another line slowly appeared. It didn't point toward Earth, it pointed away. The two lines crossed each other. Then a bright circle appeared where they met. One scientist leaned closer. "That's not a destination." He paused. "It's a meeting point." Silence filled the room. The wave wasn't showing where it came from. It was showing where something would happen. The computer checked the location against every known object in space. No planet, no moon, no asteroid, nothing. The meeting point sat inside empty space, or at least space everyone believed was empty. Then another alert sounded. The giant shadow had stopped moving. The three smaller objects had stopped too. Every one of them now faced the same direction, toward the meeting point, almost like they were waiting for someone else to arrive. That's when the deepest space telescope picked up a new signal. It wasn't close. It wasn't even inside the solar system. It came from far beyond the edge where the sun's gravity grows weak. The distance was impossible to understand. Even light would need years to travel that far. Yet the signal reached Earth almost instantly. Nobody could explain that. Then the telescope captured one final image, a tiny bright dot. At first it looked harmless. 1 pixel, nothing more. 5 seconds later, it became 2 pixels, then 4, then 8. It wasn't growing. It was getting closer, far faster than anything humans had ever recorded. The lead scientist looked at the numbers one last time before taking a slow breath. "It won't take years," he whispered. "It'll be here by tomorrow." Nobody in the room questioned him. Because the screens had already started the next countdown. Nobody slept that night. Every observatory connected to the mission stayed locked on the same point in space. Scientists from around the world joined the live feed. Some believed the signal was natural, others thought it came from a machine. Nobody agreed on the answer. Then the countdown reached 0. Nothing happened. 1 second passed, then another. A quiet wave of relief moved across the room. Maybe the computer had been wrong. Maybe the strange object had changed direction. Maybe the story was finally over. It wasn't. A bright flash suddenly appeared at the meeting point. It lasted less than a second before fading away. At first it looked small. Then the telescopes adjusted their focus. The flash wasn't an explosion. It was a doorway. A glowing circle hung in empty space, shining with soft blue light. The edges moved like water, yet the center stayed perfectly still. Every camera captured the same impossible image. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. Then something started coming through. Slowly, silently, a dark shape crossed the glowing edge. It wasn't one of the three smaller objects. It wasn't the giant shadow either. This was something much bigger. The object kept moving forward until the entire doorway looked too small to hold it. Long arms stretched away from the center. Thin rings turned around its body without touching it. Blue light flowed across its surface like rivers. Nobody inside the control room said a word. Every person knew they were looking at something built with purpose. The three smaller objects immediately changed direction. Without any signal anyone could see, they moved toward the giant newcomer. Then they stopped. One by one, they lined up in front of it, like guards standing before a king. The room felt colder than ever. "What if they've been waiting for this all along?" one scientist whispered. Nobody answered, because the idea made too much sense. The giant object didn't rush forward. It stayed completely still. Then one thin beam of light reached toward Earth. The beam wasn't bright enough to blind anyone. It wasn't hot enough to damage anything. Instead, every satellite passing through it suddenly went silent. One after another. Communication stopped. Weather satellites stopped sending pictures. Navigation systems went dark. Deep space probes vanished from every tracking screen. Earth wasn't under attack. It was being cut off. Then every monitor inside the control room flashed with the same message. Not in English. Not in any language humans had ever seen. Yet somehow, everyone understood exactly what it meant. "We know you're watching." Nobody touched the keyboard. Nobody even breathed. Because a second line had already started appearing beneath the first. And this one was much worse. The strange symbols faded away. New words slowly appeared across every screen inside the control room. "You were never the first." Nobody understood what that meant. Not at first. Then the system opened another message without anyone touching a keyboard. Pictures replaced the words. Stars filled the screen. Bright dots marked hundreds of worlds spread across the galaxy. One by one, those lights started disappearing. Every few seconds, another world went dark. Nobody spoke. The room was silent except for the sound of computers recording every frame. Then the pictures stopped. A final image appeared. It showed Earth. A small blue dot, exactly where humans lived. A timer appeared beneath it. 3 days. That was all it showed. No explanation, no warning. Just a number slowly counting down. Fear spread through the room. Scientists called observatories across the world. Every telescope pointed toward the giant object. Every radio dish searched for another signal. Every satellite still working watched the same place. Nothing changed. The giant object remained perfectly still. The three smaller ones never moved. It was almost like they were waiting for Earth's answer. But nobody knew what the question was. Governments met behind closed doors. Military leaders prepared for every possible danger. News channels broke into normal programs. Around the world, people looked up at the sky, hoping to see something. There was nothing to see. That somehow made everything worse. Hours passed. The timer kept falling. Then, an old scientist quietly walked into the control room. He had retired years before, yet everyone still respected him. He looked at the message only once, then he smiled. Nobody expected that. He pointed toward the 3 smaller objects. "They're not weapons," he said. Every person turned toward him. "They're keys." The room froze. He explained that nothing in the data showed attacks. Nothing showed destruction. Every signal, every light, every movement looked like parts of one giant system working together. The giant object wasn't invading. It was waiting for permission. That changed everything. If the old scientist was right, then the timer wasn't counting down to Earth's end. It was counting down to Earth's choice. Accept or refuse. Before anyone could ask another question, every screen flashed one last time. The message changed again. Only 2 symbols appeared. One glowed blue, the other glowed red. Nobody knew which one meant yes. Nobody knew which one meant no. The countdown reached its final 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, nobody moved. 7, 6. The mission leader slowly reached toward the keyboard. 5, 4. His hand stopped above the keys. 3, 2, 1. The timer reached 0. Every light inside the control room went dark. Then a single voice echoed through the silence. It didn't come from the speakers. It didn't come from the computers. It came from everywhere at once. And it asked one simple question. Is humanity finally ready? Maybe that message was the start of humanity's greatest moment. Maybe it was our biggest test. We'll never know unless someone answers. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more space mysteries like this and tell me below. Would you press the blue